Coming up, Arctic air plunging the Midwest into freezing temperatures. How to stay safe during this dangerous cold snap, especially for the football diehards bundling up for Arrowhead this weekend. And good morning. I'm Jessica Lovell. Welcome to the Morning Medical Update. I am coming to you live this morning from my home. I am following the advice that we always give, and I'm staying home and off the roads where it is safe after weather events that we have seen this past week. The slick snow, of course, is one thing, but those freezing air temperatures is a whole other danger. Weather forecasts show the Kansas City area will stay below freezing for the next few days, and that means single-digit highs and sub-zero mornings. And of course, the wind will only make it much worse. The emergency department at the University of Kansas Health System has already seen 11 weather-related injuries this week as of Thursday afternoon. That included a few people hurt in car wrecks, slip and falls, some snow removal incidents, exposure, frostbite. So if you have to be outside, please be safe. And, of course, it's Red Friday. The Chiefs start their playoff run against the Dolphins tomorrow night, and both teams will also be battling Mother Nature. The University of Kansas Health System has a clinic at the stadium, plus several first aid stations ready to treat the fans in the stand. Emergency medicine physician Dr. Dennis Allen has a lot of experience out at Arrowhead. He is the health system's medical director of sports venues. Dr. Allen, good morning. I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Good morning.
That's okay. That's okay. We're really glad to have you this morning. The Chiefs are letting fans bring a few extra things into Arrowhead tomorrow, like blankets, cardboard pieces that they can stand on. How does the clinic at Arrowhead prepare for cold like this?
I think the main thing we need to do is staff all of our stations because we could really get busy. And we want to be sure we're fully staffed, which Rick Blevins, our nurse manager, has done a terrific job of making that happen. The other thing that we do is you just want to be sure that if somebody comes in with frostbite, you have to examine them pretty carefully, because what you don't want to do in frostbite is to thaw out and then go refreeze. It's the worst thing you can do with frostbite. So although people would not be pretty anxious to leave a playoff game, we do have to warn them that you put your extremities at risk when you freeze, and then when you thaw and then refreeze. The other thing that the Chiefs are doing, I understood from our production meeting, is they're going to have fan first. They're going to have gloves to hand out to kids. With all the hubbub of bringing your family to the game, if you're like, oh my God, I don't have my gloves for my kids, they have them there. The other thing they're handing out at fan first are those warmers that you can stick inside your gloves. So I thought that was nice. The other thing that they asked was that if you're bringing in like heavy blankets and stuff, they're going to let you do that, but just to make security go a little faster, to put those kind of things around your shoulder as you're coming in, because they don't want this to slow to a crawl when it's 0 degrees getting people to the gates.
Yeah, people want to get in there and get situated. I love what you said, though, about kids and getting those gloves. I know as a parent, like my kids' fingers, they were out sledding the other day, and I'm always worried that they're not going to tell us, hey, Mom, my gloves are wet, or, my fingers are cold. So that makes me very, very happy from a parent perspective that little fingers are going to be kept warm if those kids are brought out there. When we say bundle up, Dr. Allen, there's an acronym to remember on how to dress. It's COLD, COLD. It stands for keep clothes and skin clean. Don't overheat, because you don't want to sweat. That ends up making you colder. Use layers, because they can trap that good warm air inside your clothes. And then also stay dry. So Dr. Allen, what should people add to their outfit to protect against the cold? I know we mentioned the warmers and things like that. Anything else that they can do? Because once you're out there, it's too late. What can they do at home to really, really prepare?
Yeah, I think at this temperature, you've got to go triple layers on the top, and something's got to be thermal in those layers. Um, the other on the bottom, you got to go something thermal, but at least 2 layers on the bottom. Um, I think the other thing people don't think about is nothing will frostbite faster than your ears, um, which can be a real cosmetic problem for you down the road. So you have to be sure in this kind of temperature that something is covering your head, because that's where your head and your lungs is where you'll lose most of your heat. Um, you covering your head and covering your ears will be an important thing. I guess the other thing I would add, as far as you gave that, oh, don't overheat. I think the mistake some people make is they're all bundled up and they drive to the stadium in all their clothes. They drive to the stadium in their triple layers. Their heater is set on 70 in the car, and they're sweating by the time they get to the game. So put most of your gear on once you're at the game, and don't ride with it. I guess unless your car's heater's not working, because that's when you can get kind of sweaty. And the only other thing I'd ask them to do is really be careful with alcohol, because the cold, the calories we're burning and the fluid we're losing through respiration just to stay alive in this kind of weather, literally, is really daunting. And so you have to drink. You actually have to drink a lot. Everybody thinks of that when we're sweating and it's hot, but you have to drink a lot also when it's cold. And alcohol just increases your loss of water.
Okay, so that's not the liquid intake that we're talking about. What about heated drinks? Does that help a bit?
Yeah, I think it makes you feel better, and I get that. I don't know if it helps maintain your body temperature as much, but I'm telling you what, when you're out in the cold like this, liquid is liquid, unless it's alcohol. Liquid is liquid. And so anything you can get and drink and stay well hydrated, and people just don't think about that until it's too late.
Yeah, this is literally a whole different ball game when you're talking about these temperatures and heading out to Arrowhead. Okay, let's talk about the knuckleheads that we see without their shirts on sometimes. I know you can't unsee it. Dr. Allen, as a doctor, does that make you cringe? Should folks like that be concerned about frostbite, or is it you just got to let people like that do their thing?
Well, I mean, they need to be concerned about more than frostbite. They need to be concerned about good old-fashioned hypothermia.
Yeah.
Because your body can really lose. If you're losing that kind of heat to the environment, you can very rapidly cool down your core temperature, which becomes really dangerous. They see these players out there just wearing their normal uniforms, and they think, "I no problem." They don't realize they have some access to some heat on those sidelines that you don't have. So I think that I kind of look at those patients in the stands, and that was a Freudian slip. I kind of look at those people in the stands as future patients, because that's where that kind of thing is going. It's just going to lead to, and if you're in the care center and you're hypothermic, I mean, you're very likely going to the hospital.
So, Dr. Allen, before we let you go and wrap up, tell us, how do we know to come find you all at the stadium? If we feel the tingling, how do we know we're in hypothermia? Just let us know when we need to step away and come find you.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to hypothermia, what's interesting is you can get to a level that you actually stop shivering. Your body's given up shivering, producing heat. Um, so if what we see a lot in those patients is some alteration in their mental status. Um, and we get a lot of cases at Airhead, as you might imagine, of this guy's just not acting right. Well, even though he just might be intoxicated, that may not be a bad time for us to check him out. I think as far as frostbite, it's going to be pain and tingling and loss of normal skin color. Is when you just need, even if all you need is to come in and just find a place to warm up, which the Chiefs will have multiple warming stations at the stadium tomorrow that they can direct you to. So if all you need is just kind of warm your hands up, warm your feet up, they'll have multiple warming stations to do that.
All right. Take advantage of it. I know you're going to be at the game tomorrow, so have fun. Stay warm, most importantly. And if you don't mind, stick around. We may have a few audience questions for you. So we'll get back with you here in just a moment, Dr. Allen. I do now want to turn to one of the health system doctors who also treats Chiefs players, sports medicine physician, Dr. JP Darsh, actually used to play in the NFL himself. Dr. Darsh, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
So you played professionally in Kansas City and in Seattle and up north in Toronto. Can you remember the coldest game you ever played in?
I sure do. Growing up in Canada, you would assume it would have been a game up there, but thankfully the season up there, including in the pros, ends in late November. So you miss the worst part of it. But I remember very distinctly playing. I believe it was 2004 when I was playing with Seattle, playing a playoff game in Green Bay. Was well minus below zero. I don't remember the exact temperature, but I remember thinking that if a Canadian like me could barely handle it, I don't know what it was for the other guys.
Yeah, exactly. You remember the exact moment where you were when it was that cold. So we know the cold makes the ground much harder, the leather on the ball much stiffer. How does the cold weather actually change the way the players play?
Especially at the pro level, there's so much stuff. For example, the field at Arrowhead, they have heaters underneath the field, so the field itself is really not too bad, not too much change from a regular game. At the high school level, you have those fields that are really frozen. Although now most stadiums play on that artificial turf, so it's not as bad. But as far as the game itself, like you mentioned, the ball is very much different. That and there's not much you can do about it. They try to keep him warm on the sideline, but when it gets out there, even for a minute or so, it's on the field, it gets really frozen. The grip is much harder. So for anybody handling the ball, it definitely makes a difference. So the key is to keep your hands warm, which is not always easy. But there's hand warmers, there's gloves, and also on the sideline. I mean, the like Dr. Allen mentioned, like the access to the heating sources is huge. I mean, the benches are heated. There's huge fans that blowing hot air, hot enough that it'll burn your clothes. When I go stand on it as the doctor in my normal clothes, it'll kind of melt your jacket a little bit. And you try to do your best.
Right. Yeah. You see Mahomes over there kind of with that big cape, that big coat on. He looks pretty warm under there. But so are there any other injuries? We talk about the warmer ground or maybe not as frozen for concussion issues, but are there any other injuries that can happen just being out there playing that kind of rigorous sport when your muscles and your body isn't performing at maybe its regular play?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's with a harder ground. I mean, of course, there's a higher risk of concussion, things like that. But like I just said, pro level is not too bad because the field usually are heated. But the biggest thing is to make sure players find a way to keep their bodies really warm. Because if you're not quite warmed up, and then obviously you're going to have a risk of soft tissue injuries. Pulling a hamstring, soft tissue muscle pulls, strains. So that's the biggest key. But again, for the most part, the players are professional. They know how to take care of their bodies. They have all the resources you can imagine. out there to try to stay warm. I think it's harder for the players that don't play as much. For the backup players that just go in once in a while on special teams, makes it harder. But with all these things you have, that when you're running around, when you're playing, and you'll see guys, they'll a lot of them, most of them probably, they won't even wear sleeves. That's because they get to warm up on the side, and sometimes actually sleeves can be even worse, because if you get, the worst thing that can happen is have your clothes wet, and then you get back out there in the cold, and then now you're really cold. So it's for these guys tomorrow. It's not. I feel more bad for people like myself that's going to be standing there not moving and not sitting on the warm bench.
Right. It kind of gives a whole new meaning to home field advantage when we're talking about these kind of temperatures, right?
Well, yeah, I think you compare the Chiefs and the Dolphins. Of course, nobody enjoys it. I mean, cold is cold, just like heat is heat. When you play in the 100-degree weather in Miami, when you're living in that area, it's a little bit easier, if anything, mentally. People here in Kansas City, the players have been, walking around, going to the store, driving in that kind of weather, so they're not quite as shell shocked as when the guys coming from Miami are going to be. But some they have to do what they got to do, and they're professionals. And once the game starts, it's still the same game.
Right.
The biggest thing I would say to look at is how handling the ball. That can I like the fact that their quarterbacks grew up in Hawaii, played down south, lives in Miami now. So you got to hope that he's going to struggle a little bit holding the ball.
Right. Yes. Yes. We will hope so. Yeah. It's just, it always makes me think, like, how do they mentally, I guess, prepare to play in the cold? I don't think you're going to get a lot of those tough football players on the sideline telling each other, "Oh, I'm really cold out here." So it's almost like they have to. It's like a mental block. They got to put it out of their mind, right?
Yeah, well, I promise you're going to hear a lot of guys say it's really cold. Yeah,
Okay.
they will complain about it. There's no doubt.
Okay.
But once they get out there, then once it's time to play, then that's the last thing you got to think about. They'll be, and I think both teams will just play like every player out there. Once they get between the white lines, they start playing. It's still football. I mean, they might feel sorry for themselves a little bit sitting on the sideline for a while, but they'll be okay.
All right, they can feel sorry for themselves sitting next to you. You guys can kind of commiserate a little bit. So keep each other warm. Dr. Darsh, just first of all, of course, thanks for keeping the team healthy this year, as always. If you don't mind, stick around a little bit, because we may have some audience questions for you coming up here in just a moment. So be sure to ask your questions. You can use the chat on YouTube or Facebook. You can tweet us or email the Medical News Network. The info is right there on your screen. Let's get a COVID count from Dr. Dana Hawkinson this morning. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, hi, I'm good.
You look cold.
I'm not too bad. I'm at the top of Mount Oriad, though, can't you
Nice.
tell? Yeah. Right now in the health system, I know we've had some off days here. We have 33 active patients, 6 of those in the ICU. So we've been a little bit up and down the last couple of weeks, but right now, 33 active patients.
Okay, Hawk, I'm curious how you would answer the question that's in this ABC News headline. It says, "Why are 1,500 Americans still dying from COVID every week?" The article explained that 1,500 COVID deaths a week was way down, of course, from the worst part of the pandemic, when there were around 1,500 deaths a day. But it also suggests that people are ignoring the vaccine and might not be getting the treatments that they need for COVID, like Paxlovid. So in your opinion, why still are 1,500 people dying each week from COVID?
Yeah, I think it is a tragedy. It is too many for sure. And that just goes to show you that while some people just claim the pandemic is over, we know it continues to impact people's life on a daily basis, some more than others. And so we really have to be thoughtful and considerate of that. I think it is multifactorial as to why that is. You've heard Dr. Stites say, and we've said that COVID now has really become a disease of those that are most at risk. So, of course, age, but also comorbid conditions, things like diabetes mellitus, heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, and of course, immunosuppression and cancer all increase your risk of hospitalization and severe disease. So we know that there are a lot of people out there living every day with those things, multiple things, one or two or three of those things that I just mentioned. So that coupled, just as with you said, Jessica, lack of uptake of the new vaccine, or this year, or a recent uptake of the vaccine, we know that that does help reduce your chance of hospitalization, severe disease. And then, of course, you also mentioned certainly lack of using the antivirals that are available. Most prominently, we talk about Paxlovid. There is also molnupiravir for those people who cannot tolerate Paxlovid. But doing those things, being vigilant in your public health and infection prevention pillars like hand washing, wearing a mask in those situations, understanding the situations that you're going into, and then getting updated vaccines, and then having a plan. And that plan is, if you do get symptoms, test early. If it is negative, if you're testing at home, again, you may have to test 2 or 3 days in a row. If it is positive, you really have to call your medical team, because if you're at that higher risk of hospitalization, severe disease, it is very important to get on those oral antivirals like Paxlovid and molnupiravir. So I think it is multifactorial. Now, again, the disease mostly is a disease of those at greatest risk, and I mentioned those before. But the deaths that we see and the hospitalizations we see still are too many per week. That is very true.
Doc Hawk, thank you so much. I want to check and see. I know we had a couple of reporters joining us this morning. I wanted to give them a moment to see if they had any questions. Okay, thank you for joining us this morning, by the way. Let's get to some questions from our viewers today. Perry wants to know, Dr. Allen, how many ambulances are in standby at any given time out at a Chiefs game? Oh, I think you're on mute.
There I go again.
That's okay.
We'll have one that's in the tunnel, which is mainly to transport players off the field that need to go to the hospital. And there'll be 2 other ambulances that are available to us for transport of fans. But we have an advantage that we haven't had at other venues, that we actually have in working with us in our care center are paramedic teams. So they're from Kansas City, Missouri Fire, so they can actually get an ambulance pretty quickly to our care center, to our first aid center 114. But they can also start with the treatment and the stabilization working with us. So we're not waiting for we're never waiting for a team, but we may be waiting for their box to ride in. And as you know, depending on the time of the game, that can be variable. I mean, I've had games that I rode in a golf cart to take a patient to the ambulance at the gate, because we were at the end of the game, nothing was getting in and out. So we'll do what we got to do.
Another question for you, Dr. Allen. Jeremy wants to know, how does this cold weather and that cold air affect somebody who already has lung issues, so allergies, asthma?
Yeah, well, I think that anybody that has reactive airway disease, which, they're just going to exacerbate breathing that cold air. The other thing that will happen is just you don't realize, as you're working harder to breathe, you're just losing more of your volume. You just need to hydrate more, because the harder you're working to breathe, and then with like COPD, the harder you're working to breathe, the more liquid, the more fluid you're losing, and you have to think about rehydrating. But I think anybody with reactive airway disease, this'll, I mean, these are the kind of days, they weren't this cold, but these were the kind of days that my daughter, before soccer matches, she was hitting inhalers prior to going out there because she just knew that cold weather was just going to exacerbate her reactive airway disease.
Dr. Darsh, this question is for you. So Terry wants to know if you could just describe, I think we know the answer, but what is the wind like when you're down there on the field? What's it like at Arrowhead? Make all of us who aren't going to the game feel really good about our choice of staying home.
Yeah, well, I think the wind at Arrowhead is definitely significant, and it's way more pronounced when you're on the field, standing on the fifth, like in the middle of the field, compared to even the sideline and in the stands. So hopefully, whoever's going to the game, they have the seats that are they're covered somewhere, not having too much exposure to this. But it's known, like there's a lot of like swirling winds in there, just in general, and I'm expecting tomorrow to be pretty pretty difficult to deal with.
Better you than us, okay, Dr. Darsh?
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, we have a question. Last question is from one of our reporter friends at WIBW in Topeka. Overall, Dr. Allen, is it a good idea to go to the Chiefs game tomorrow?
Well, I think if you're, I will tell you, this is the second coldest game. I, as a fan, went to the coldest game before this when we played the Colts. In the playoffs.
I was at that game. I remember it.
Yeah.
It was the worst.
Well, but it was fun.
Was
it? besides getting beat by the Colts, it was fun. No, I think you got to be a true fan and you got to enjoy football. But if you're smart and you take care of yourself, you hydrate appropriately, you dress in layers, Yeah, I'm like, why not? I mean, if I wasn't down on the field, I'd go, because it's just too fun to watch these guys. And sometimes you'll watch these guys, as JP was talking about, when they start to perform. If you're watching them on TV, you don't even realize it's as cold as it is, because it doesn't look cold on TV most of the time, unless you're in Green Bay. And these guys just start performing and they just do their thing, and it's just too fun to watch.
You're too fun. I think what you're saying, I think your takeaway today is if you just do it right and you follow the tips that you and Dr. Darsh have been talking about this morning, that it's worth it.
Yeah, it is. And I think the only thing we sometimes see in the care centers is we've seen people come in that were they're pulling their oxygen tank with them, or the last game a couple games ago, the guy is 4 weeks out of coronary bypass surgery, and you're like, holy cow, what are you doing here? How did you think this was going to turn out? So I think if you're relatively, you have to think of your health too, and if you've got a bad chronic disease, or you're a new post-op, this may not be the best idea for you.
Yeah. All right. When was that game, by the way? Was that 95, 96, 97, that Colts game? Do you remember?
I'm thinking
it stuck with me.
Before that, because Jim Harbaugh was the coach. Well, I'm sorry, the quarterback of the Colts.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe Darsh knows. Let's see if Dr. Darsh knows. Do you remember?
I'm going to go on a limb and say early mid-90s is what would be my guess.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. It's been a minute. Dr. Allen, thank you so much. Dr. Darsh, what's the takeaway for folks listening this morning?
Takeaway is dress warm, be ready for it, don't drink too much, and enjoy the game. Hopefully you'll win.
Okay, let's win. Follow your own advice. Stay warm out there. We'll be thinking of you. I'll be thinking of you back here under my heated blanket. Thank you guys so much. It's been a great discussion this morning. And earlier this week, we had another great discussion with a lot of really good information that we felt was worth repeating. So as we leave you today, here are some highlights from Wednesday's episode. We have Dr. Bhavsar addressing frostbite, Dr. Love discussing snow shoveling, and Dr. Jessica Callender-Rich talking more about the importance of checking on our older loved ones.
Let's talk about what parents should know with kids, because they don't always know how to regulate their body temperature and how to keep it warm.
So if your kids are going to be playing outside in snow, going for sliding, and make sure they're well protected, they're layered up, their skin is not exposed, and if it's going to be a very cold, like wintry, kind of blistery day, make sure they stay covered, they're not outdoors for too long, and their face is covered as much as possible. It's very common for us to see the kids with a kind of that red nose becoming that little bit of frostbite on the tip of the nose.
Can cold weather trigger a heart attack? Is that truth or myth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's something that the public often thinks about is people having heart attack while shoveling snow. I don't think that cold weather directly causes heart attacks, but oftentimes for people this is their one moment of exertion for the year. They may not mow their own lawn, they may have somebody else do that. They get some snow on the stoop, they go out to shovel, and that amount of exertion can reveal underlying coronary artery disease or blockages in the heart arteries. So sometimes we will see people come in with chest pain or heart attack-like symptoms as a result of shoveling snow and being out in that cold weather.
Yeah, just that surge of energy. But what else keeps you up at night when it comes to our aging population during these cold winter months?
So many things.
I know. Share with us right now.
I mean, I think it's many of the things that we've discussed, right? Like ensuring that people have heat, that they have the support that they need, that they have someone who can run to the pharmacy and get their medication so that they don't go out, so that they have a ride to dialysis. This is a really big deal, especially for people that perhaps don't drive themselves or don't want to drive in that icy, cold, snowy weather, right? And so it's just sort of really important to reach out to your neighbors and your friends and your family and make sure that they have the things that they need so that they can be the most successful.
A rare condition comes with a choice: remove your colon or wait for cancer. I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Open Mics with Dr. Stites. New research aimed at delaying the cancer as long as possible, the important first step, and need for new treatments.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now everywhere podcasts are available.